Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored with Ilu Nishmas Moshe Shalom ben Yosef Nassan Morris Edison by Menachem Chaim and Yosef Frankel. We're going to continue on chapter 26, verse 6. We're still when things are going to be going well for the Jewish people, when they're doing the mitzvahs appropriately. So we were discussing yesterday, the beginning of the verse, where God says he'll place peace in the land. And then at the end of the verse, it says, Vishpati chayara amin haaretz, and God will remove evil beasts from the land, and the sword will not pass through your land. This assurance of getting rid of evil beasts, I mean, it's a little bit of an interesting statement because everyone should be well everywhere, but you know, you talk about having food, you talk about having water, you talk about having peace. These are the biggies. It's just interesting, and I'll make sure there's no dangerous animals around. It's a little bit hard to see where that fits in. Of course, it sounds good, it sounds important, but it seems to pale in comparison in terms of the standard risk level. If you go to the second Ramban on this pasuk, second Ramban on pasuk Vav, Vishbati chayara amina aretz, Hadash Reb Yehuda she'amar ma'avira min ha'olam hu kipshuto shlo yavau chayos ra'os ba'artzam. That the idea is that dangerous animals will not come into the land of Israel during these times of blessing. Kibiyos hasava ubirvos hatova vayos ha'arim maleos adam lo savona chayos b'yishuv. That the idea is that since there's so much blessing and so many people there, so that will sort of deter the animals from coming, that it will be the natural result of all of the blessing in your land. V'aldas Reb Shimon she'amar mashpishin shlo yaziku yomar vishpati ro'as hachayos min haaretz. Reb Shimon says a different shot. Reb Shimon in the Brisa says that what it means is I will see to it that animals are no longer dangerous. In other words, the first shot was there's dangerous animals in the land, but I'll see to it that they don't come into Israel. The second shot is that there will be no such thing as dangerous animals anymore. That's the correct shot, says the Ramban. Kitia Eretz Yisrael based kiyuma mitzvos kashera. Maybe he doesn't mean, by the way, no dangerous animals in the entire world, but just no dangerous animals in the land of Israel. Because when the Jewish people are on all cylinders in their observance of the mitzvos, then Israel will be kasher haya ha'olam b'tchilaso Kodem cheto shel adam harishon ein chaya varemes meimis adam. That before the sin, the same way that Adam and Eve were not endangered by animals. So when you think about it, there was just two of them. There are all these creatures around. The way God made the world at the beginning is that human beings had nothing to fear from animals. K'moshe amru ein arod meimis el chet meimis. Brachos is a really interesting thing, that it's not that the animals had the capacity to kill, it's that sin had the capacity to kill. Okay. The whole idea that a beast can kill someone is less about the beast and more about the sin of humanity. Not necessarily that the person sinned, by the way. But the point is that this is not how the world was supposed to be. The world was supposed to be a place where human beings and animals could coexist in a safe way. But then once Adam sinned and human beings didn't deserve for the world to be in that way anymore, then God ingrained into these creatures the inclination to attack each other, to attack human beings. Okay. But the blessing is that if the Jewish people are doing everything they're supposed to do, then animals in the land of Israel will be like the animals before the sin of Adam and Chava. When God creates animals, God says, I'm giving you the grass of the land to eat. What do you mean the grass of the land to eat? They're predators. They eat more than the grass of the land. It says, It says explicitly in the pasuk in Bereshis that for all these creatures, including the beasts of the land, God gave them grass to eat. And the pasuk explicitly says, and it was so. It wasn't some plan that didn't come to fruition. This was the natural inclination that God ingrained into these creatures. And then, once Adam and Chava sinned, then God ingrained a whole different nature into these beasts. So originally, animals could coexist with humanity peacefully. Then there was the sin of Adam and Chava, and then it became the nature of animals that they would attack. At least some animals that they would attack. They would attack each other. They would attack humanity. Then, and by the way, at that point, humanity was not allowed to kill an animal. A human being could kill an animal to protect him or herself, but couldn't kill an animal for meat. Then, in the aftermath of the flood, where the whole world would have been destroyed if not for Noach and his family, God permitted Noach and his descendants to kill animals for meat. But the Ramban says, despite that changing of the dynamic, God didn't take away the inclination of animals to attack. So animals were still in attack mode, at least some animals were still in attack mode, like they were after the sin of Adam. But now humanity could kill animals to get things from animals. Hubios Eretz Yisrael ala shleimus tishbas ruas ben hagam v'yamdu ala teva rishon esher husam bohem be'eis yitzirasa. And when everything was fine and well in the land of Israel, Jewish people were conducting themselves appropriately, would be conducting themselves appropriately, then the animals would revert to their original inclination. Okay, interesting Ramban to think about. That's the first thing. I want to see the Orach Chaim on Pasuk Vav. It's the second Orach Chaim on the Pasuk. Vishbati Chayav Perish. Utzad Sheftichem Hashem. Shiyov Shim Betach Ish Tachas Kafnov Uteina. So, the end of verse 5 said you'll live in a secure way. And that implies that people can just sit under their fig trees and not worry. If everything is so secure, that means outlying areas, there's going to be less people around. In other words, if people can live in it together and there's nothing to worry about, and you don't have to, create distances between yourself and others, that means there's a lot of room in the standard place of civilization, which also means that there's going to be a lot of possibility for not so many people in the outlying areas. The Kivin Shekain, and being that that's the case, Yinsuum Sham Chayos Hamidbarios, then that means there's going to be a lot of beasts on the path, but there's not people around. The Yiskarvu Lavo El Hayishuv, and then they'll be more inclined to come into, and then once they're on those far outlying areas, they will be more inclined to come to places of civilization also. Omar Vishpati Chayam Ra Min Aretz Perish Eretz Asher Baba Hamecho Shetia Bo Chayara Shumak Makarv Yishuv Ulazel Lo Omar Ba'artzachem Hishis Chalom B'Samach Milfonel Malachria. So it's interesting. It says, we mentioned this yesterday, the beginning of the pasuk says there'll be peace in the land. The end of the pasuk says that the sword won't come into your land. The Orach Chaim says that what we're getting at is, as things are so peaceful, it's actually more likely that animals will kind of go beyond certain boundaries and they might come closer to your society. And that's what God is saying, that despite all those other good things, it's not going to cause animals to come closer to you. That's how the Orach Chaim explains it. Verse 7, another aspect of the blessings of God when everything is going well. You will chase your enemies, and they will fall before you by the sword. Sounds good. I mean, it sounds like you're defeating your enemies. It also sounds like you're having encounters with your enemies. I thought we said there's going to be all this peace. So which one is it? So just two quickies. Rashi says, Lifnechem lecharev, Rashi on Pasuk Zayin, Ish becharev reyehu. They'll fall by each other's swords. In other words, what I assume that means is you'll chase your enemies and they'll be and first of all, they won't fight you. They'll just run away from you. And they'll be so nervous and so agitated. We have different accounts in Tanakh like this. They'll be so nervous that they'll end up striking each other. Maybe it gets confusing. So that's how Rashi explains it. But the point is, you won't even get involved in hand-to-hand combat with them. They'll run away from you and they'll kill each other. But there's a very interesting sforno here. Sforno on Pasuk Zayin, where daftemis oivechem chutz ligvulchem. You will chase your enemies beyond your own boundaries. In other words, your enemies won't come onto your land. If they come anywhere near you, you'll chase them away and they'll flee. So the Sforno was emphasizing that to whatever extent there's some level of encounter, it won't be on your homeland, which of course is one of the greatest things that countries hope for, that if there is ever military interaction, it should be on someone else's land, not on their land. V'naflu lifnechem lecharev, they will fall before you by the sword. Bezulas milchamaschem, without having war with you. So I don't know if that means that as they're running, they'll die, they'll accidentally kill each other as they're running, which sort of was implied by Rashi. I don't know if it means that they'll get into fights with each other and there'll be less of them around. I'm not sure which one it means, but this is just interesting things to think about. Okay, let's go on now to verse 9. We're still in verses of blessing. Don't worry, we're going to get to the second part tomorrow. Verse 9, Ufanisi alechem, I will turn to you. Vifresiaschem, I will make you fruitful. Virbesiaschem, I will make you great in number. Vakimosi esprisi itchem, and I will establish my covenant with you. What does that mean? Does that mean there wasn't a covenant until that point? And if there was a covenant, there is a covenant. So does that mean that God's not interested in keeping the covenant until we're doing everything right? What good is the covenant if that's the only deal? Like, if you're perfect, I'm on your side. Is that what it means? What's meant by this last verse? I will establish my covenant with you. Last Rashi on Pasuk Tes, Vakimosias Prisitchem, Bris Chadasha. It'll be a new covenant, a new set of rules. Lo kibrisa rishona shefartimosa, el bris chadasha shelo tufar. You sort of broke the first set of rules. Presumably that refers to the sin of the golden calf. But now, if you totally are on all cylinders in your service of God, it will be like a whole new covenant that you have with God. That's what Rashi says. Look at the Sforno on Pasuk Tes, the second Sforno on Pasuk Tes. Itchem, akimeu imchem bizchuschem. I'll have a covenant with you in your own merit. Lo she'ezkor lochem brisavos bovad. You're not just going to be holding the coattails of the patriarchs and matriarchs. That's another shot. So we discussed this morning the Ramban and the Orach Chaim regarding what exactly is the blessing that there won't be dangerous beasts in your midst. We discussed Rashi and the Sforno regarding what does it mean that your enemies will fall before you by the sword if you're not supposed to have war. And we discussed Rashi and the Sforno regarding what does it mean I'll establish a bris with you. Okay.